All right, so raise your hand if you have some sort of an heirloom that you got passed down from your parents or grandparents, anything like that.
Nice.
That's actually very cool. I don't think I have it. I wish I had some, but does anybody want to share one?
Instrument?
An instrument?
Yeah, some jewelry from my grandma.
Jewelry from your grandma? Very cool. Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's very cool to have that type of thing to remember your ancestors. Our next speaker, Llisa Demetrios, she has about 50,000 artifacts from her grandparents. Ray and Charles Eames founded the group Eames that has the iconic chair that if you don't know it by name, you definitely know it by the sight. And then the elephant over there, if you saw it on the way in, it's super beautiful. Really glad that we could have that here. Thank you for bringing that. So yeah, she's going to be speaking about how her grandparents created the firm and how they've invested in sustainability and innovation and fun and playfulness to create that legacy that we still see today. So that really embodies the whole idea of this life upgraded. So no further ado, Llisa Demetrios, she's the chief curator at the Eames Institute of Infinite Curiosity.
You got it. That's great. Congratulations. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. It's always a pleasure to talk about the side of sustainability that my grandparents focused on, because that really is what they were thinking of. I don't know if you realize, but they actually discontinued certain materials when they knew that was bad for the environment, and then told my mom, don't bring it until there's an eco-friendly. So the red chair that's next to the elephant over there is the eco-friendly plastic that Vitra and Herman Miller brought back, to contrast with some of the earlier pieces too. So Ray and Charles Eames are my grandparents. I'm the youngest of 5 grandchildren. I thought everyone's grandparents made movies like Powers of 10 or, put us in their short films whenever we visited. What I loved is they never talked down to us. They always just shared whatever they were working on. Now, this is on one of the visits down to Los Angeles. That's where their office was. But what I'm really enjoying here is also sharing it's far beyond furniture is what they designed. Now, when they travel, they like to write to us in a rebus form. As my daughter says, it's emojis before emojis. We're going to translate this. Dear loves, I, a half an apple, a flower bin. I have been thinking of you all. This city is a beautiful one. It has many statues, the Kremlin, and vodka. Now, can anyone guess why my grandfather signed his name L's burning over a fire? Because if you had to describe it, those are charred L's. They believed eventually everything connects people, ideas, objects. The quality of the connections is the key to the quality per se. Now, this is a chair that many people recognize, and it's a fabulous chair. But Ray actually discontinued the Brazilian rosewood when she heard how bad it was for the forest to harvest it. And so it took about 20 years for then Herman Miller and Vitra to figure out palisander is the material that they use. Now, one thing I love about with my grandparents' work is when they were designing something like that, they called it designing seating, not designing a chair. Because if you say you're designing a chair, you're eliminating the ottoman before you've thought of it. Now, this is a chair that Charles and Ray Eames designed in the late 1930s. And when they installed it, they realized something. The only person they'd been thinking about was the person going to sitting and watching a performance, not the person who had to take care of the chair. So, the role, and also Charles and Ray were talking about what is your job as an architect, and they said the role of the designer is that of a very good, thoughtful host, anticipating the needs of his guests. So when they designed the next chair, which is that red chair from the organic design competition in 1940, it actually was supposed to be unupholstered, so it was easier to take care of. However, it is upholstered because they said they had to hide all their mistakes. So when Ray and Charles got married in 1941, it was to make an unupholstered wooden chair that should have been made in the first place. So what they realized, because Ray came from painting and Charles came from architecture, this wood is not doing what they expected it to do. You have to release tension, you have to cut holes in it. And so for them, in the end, they will split it into 2 pieces and it becomes the LCW there. But it was learning by doing, by being hands-on is why they came to that solution. And it's how they decided to solve everything afterwards. We don't do art, we solve problems. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Now, this is a beautiful piece, but that's actually a material test because they're trying to make their own veneer thicker and thinner and push it as many ways as possible. This is 1943 while they're working on the chair. Now, while working on that chair, They're at a party, and a friend of theirs says, soldiers carried off the field. If a metal splint is put on the leg, the wound becomes far worse. So could something be made in wood? And that becomes the leg splint. 100,000 of these are made for the Navy by 1943. Imagine, Ray and Charles are only married 2 years at that point, but they're doing this. But most importantly, it was a way to help the war effort without hurting anybody. The most important thing is that you love what you're doing, and the second, that you're not afraid of where your next idea will lead. I thought that might resonate with all of you, with all the amazing projects that you're doing. Now, taking that molded plywood, they made children's furniture, and they did make that elephant. The funny thing about the elephant, it wasn't mass produced until long after Ray and Charles had passed away, because it's harder to make than a lounge chair and ottoman. I always feel like the technology still catches up to how Ray and Charles produced their furniture. So this was in 2007, is the sweet one that you see over there for Charles's centennial. Now this is 1946, this is the LCW that was finally produced. It's in a show in 1946, and George Nelson, these initials down here, sees that chair and tells Mr. Dupree, those are his initials, we should be producing this chair. Mr. Dupree flies to New York, he agrees and invites Charles to come talk about mass producing the chair. My grandparents never wanted to make a chair once. They wanted to figure out a system how to make it 100,000 times. So Charles went one day before he was expected to see what the company town was like. What are people doing? What are people making? He goes to the cemetery to see if people have time to put fresh flowers on the graves. What kind of bread is at the bakery? Is it instant bread, or is there beautiful braided loaves of bread, which there are? And the last place he goes is Frank's. Frank's is a local diner, and he can hear people talk about the company. So even before he meets Mr. Dupree, he calls Ray and says, I think we found a company of quality that we can work with. And that's true. Now, I knew that part of the story, but I later heard Mr. Nelson said to Mr. Dupree, if you choose not to work with them, Ray and Charles will always be 6 years ahead of us. So that's another part of the story. But then there's even more with that story. We work because a chain reaction, each subject leads to the next. For Ray and Charles, they had to create a market for these chairs because so many people were unfamiliar with these materials getting used for their chairs. So they actually created the division at Herman Miller to test the furniture. It's why Herman Miller today has the longest guarantees for their furniture, is because Ray and Charles did it for each one of their chairs. And they had the sandbag hit it 10,000 times and such. This is just another project where Ray and Charles were thinking of sustainable living, thinking about using prefabricated houses, and they even did this for their own home. This is a flow chart that Charles was making, and then Ray was designing the covers of the magazine in Los Angeles. And these are some of the things that we share over in our Richmond space as we prepare for our future Birkenstock space in 2030. And then their own home was published in 1949. Again, mass production was about making the quality even better for everybody. And then this is the interiors of their home. The details are not the details, they make the product. It will in the end be these details that give the product its life. Now the reason I have these two chairs side by side, does anyone notice the edge? So the early versions have a cloth edge, but that starts to wear out really quickly and people throw away the upholstery. It's why it becomes a rubberized edge on the next version. And these are the iterations that we share on the tours. Here's Ray and Charles working on the Eames aluminum group. These are the wooden prototypes that get cast in aluminum for the chair here. Now the person who made them, he made 7 of these. And Ray and Charles picked the first one he made. And he's like, you gotta be kidding me, I have 6 more. And then they said something he agreed with. They said, because you made the other 6, we know the first one is right. They even created their own graphics. That was part of the guest-host relationship, how to share about what you were making. And then this is an exhibit that we have right now over at Richmond, which is, if you asked Ray and Charles, did you design this red chair in a flash? They say yes, a 30-year flash, because they kept going back and reiterating, trying to be even more sensitive to the environment in the production of their chairs. This blue chair is the grandparent of that chair. As people are sitting longer, it needs a seat for upholstery, it needs to be deeper. We wanted to make the best for the most for the least. Now this is in Richmond, in our warehouse, where the team is archiving. We're digitizing these 40,000 objects that Ray and Charles made. Ray and Charles have 40 designs still in production by Eames office, where we work particularly with Herman Miller and Vitra. We have the graphics they used in their brochures, their catalogs and such, and we can show this iterative progress on their furniture. Now, Ray and Charles were very good friends with Buckminster Fuller. This is a favorite book in my mom's library, which is something written to her, to Miss Llisa Eames. But he had a huge influence on Ray and Charles of thinking sustainably. And so this is a quote that they gave in 1972. The scary fact is that many of our dreams have come true. We wanted a more efficient technology and we got pesticides in the soil. We wanted cars and television sets and appliances, and each of us thought he was the only one wanting that. Our dreams have come at the expense of Lake Michigan. That doesn't mean the dreams were all wrong. It means that there was an error somewhere in the wish and we have to fix it. And so that's why I like coming back to this. It's a very famous quote. If you looked it up, it's the Lake Michigan dream. But that really informed the decisions that they were making in any project that they did. So in 1969, just a few years before that quote, Ray and Charles were in an exhibit and were asked to explain their design process. Now, most people wrote a few paragraphs for the curator, but this is how they explained it, and it's actually quite clear. The first circle is what Ray and Charles in their office wanted to accomplish on a project. The second was always the client, but there was always a third section, society as a whole. And you always have to focus on the part that overlaps for all three. And I'll show you some examples in just a moment. Ray and Charles took this idea a little further with 5 circles right here. The example they liked to give was making furniture with Herman Miller had to be goodness all the way down. It has to be good for the company, good for the person online making your furniture, good for the designer, good for the community, and good for the environment. It's goodness all the way down. So one project, did anyone know they designed a National Aquarium proposal? Sadly nixed by Nixon. But for them, what they were interested in is, how do you make the invisible visible? How do you nurture a generation about ocean conservation? And so by doing that, they created this proposal. When it didn't happen, they made the booklet, which informs the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Baltimore Aquarium. So I love how these ideas live on in different ways. IBM was asked to make a large donation to a new museum down in Los Angeles. They said, we'd rather give you an exhibit by Ray and Charles Eames. That's what creates Mathematica. IBM liked it so much, when it opened in 1961, they asked for 2 more sets. They're in Boston, New York, and at the Henry Ford, still exciting generations of mathematicians and scientists. They bridged a communication gap with Russia with the multi-screen presentation, glimpses of the USA showing life in America to those living in Russia. But the trick is, by showing 7 screens instead of 1, you're showing the vastness of the United States without saying it. And then airport seating. Some of you may have sat in that from time to time. When they were asked to design seating, their first question was, well, what's wrong with the existing airport seating? So they talked to maintenance teams at 4 airports. And you know what the big problem was? Replacement parts. And they said, well, you have replacement parts, that's good. And they said, no, the replacement part, the back of the seat are 2 different shapes. They're heavily upholstered. It takes 3 of us to pop out the old and put in the new, and it takes up a lot of storage. So what did Ray and Charles do? They made the back and the seat the same shape. It rolls up into a little tube. It takes 1 person and 1 screwdriver to pop it out and put it in. That's why it lasts. Ray and Charles really believed design was about improving the world. And here's where we're combining. What we're showing here is all of these projects are being worked on at one time with Ray and Charles. Graphics, architecture. That's a graphic from Mathematica. The concept of appropriateness and this how should be-ness has equal value in the surface, in the making of a work, and in science. I love these graphics from Griffith Park Railroad. We have a scale model too. It uses many materials, old and new. Again, promoting their furniture with Herman Miller. They just had a lot of fun. Communications primer. We worked very hard at that, enjoying ourselves. We didn't let anything interfere with what we were doing, our hard work. That in itself was a great pleasure. Here they are working. We shipped 750,000 slides, images, and prints to the Library of Congress after they passed. And when my mom went back into their office, she said it looked like nothing had been taken. One of my favorite drawers is the scale people drawers. If you're making scale models, you have to have scale people. One day on one of the shoots, everything could be done in-house at their office. They could take the pictures, they could make the prototypes. They usually make the first 5,000 or something. Someone drove in on that motorcycle. Ray and Charles asked them to bring it up on set. Do notice the kickstand is down, but it's a very famous shot of my grandparents. Take your pleasure seriously. One of my favorites is the drawers from the graphics room. I just wanted to give you, it's more than chairs over at Richmond. I thought rainbows came from these drawers because there were drawers like this. And you can't read it at the back, but it says, please sharpen pencils so the numbers can be read. There's all these systems within systems. Do not use these papers without asking Ray. Ray knew exactly. Now those papers that you see in the drawer, as an example, are used in the Revell toy house as bedding. But one of my favorites is how they covered their electric outlet covers. The front is as beautiful as the back. Toys are not really serious, really as innocent as they look. Toys and games are preludes to serious ideas. So we have 200 toy boxes of toys that Ray and Charles collected. Am I doing good on time?
You're perfect.
Okay. Wanted to pack a lot in. Okay. So we have 200 boxes of toys. What's interesting is there's toys that Ray and Charles designed and also that they collected. Now, as they traveled more and more around the world, they found these two toys were the two that they most often saw, kites and tops. And if you think about kites and tops, they're so well designed you forgot they were designed. And so they had them in almost every room at the office because the tops particularly were great icebreakers as they're meeting people from all over the world. So some of these are the beautiful kites they collected. More tops, that represents 5 different countries. This wonderful boat fans out to show the different levels. There's this great line, Ray and Charles were like in Stockholm or something, and somebody said, aren't you happy to see your furniture at the airport? And they're like, no, we want to see what you're making. They're always curious. You may solve the spatial problem out of a love for dance, but you didn't love dance in order to solve the problem. This circus mirror was wonderful. It was an example. So Ray and Charles, when they designed the IBM seating for the IBM Pavilion, and talking to maintenance teams again, they said, please don't have the furniture touch the ground, the benches, because we have to hose and sweep every day underneath. So they did a cantilever and mounted them into the wall, the cement wall. But then they had circus mirrors every few benches. The circus mirror was for children to make faces at themselves to buy time for the parents to sit down on the bench and figure out where next to go in the show. That's the guest-host relationship. And the music box, Ray and Charles had some beautiful music boxes at their office as just examples that you don't have to be afraid of all machines. There's many machines that can bring you joy. This toy is a beautiful toy. It was a gift from Charles from Billy Wilder. If you ask them who their favorite architect was, they always said Billy Wilder, the filmmaker, because how the filmmaker works is about structure. It's then used in the House of Cards you see in the bottom right. It will also be in the film Toccata for Toy Trains. It will be a prop in a Herman Miller showroom and at their very first Christmas at the Eames house. And here they are making one of their short films. And we have those toys. We are tradesmen because we're really solving problems for other people or ourselves. Design was about addressing the need for them. And this is another toy they designed. I don't know if you can see it, but this toy that they designed here, it's a tube, but it's a hexagon, not a circle. The reason it's a hexagon is because then it won't roll off the shopkeeper's shelf. Everything they did was intentional, and I just love being able to share this. But it's interesting how seemingly whimsical things find a use eventually. And I'm going to finish with the solar toy. So, Forecast program was created by Alcoa Aluminum to see what designers could make with aluminum. So they reached out. Ray and Charles made this wonderful spinning toy. It does absolutely nothing fabulously, but the trick is it's run by a solar panel. And what they're trying to do is introduce the idea there's alternatives to fossil fuels. They believed in more found learning, less teaching, and engaging in that way. And this is where we're moving in the future. Right now we're over in Richmond, where we give tours, we have offsites. Well, we have found that guests want to come on an offsite and have a tour, but then have their own meeting afterwards, and that's what we're creating over there. And then this is, in case you know in the Bay Area, the old former Birkenstock campus up in Novato. We're working with Herzog and Demeron, a wonderful firm who really, they've built museums around the world, but also understand about keeping the wonderful character of the building too. So I hope to see you in 2030 up in Novato. Thank you.